All right, guys, I got Fabian Garcia, an entrepreneur and independent thinker who hosts the daily Elevated Show with Fabian. He is a passionate advocate for critical thinking and common sense. He wants to make America smart again by helping people realize the importance of these skills. Fabian, how are we doing today?
It is a beautiful day to be here. Thank you for having me on. Can't wait to get into some very good conversation and edify your listeners and help them just become uh, more independent thinking.
Yeah, I think every human being should be as independent as humanly possible, especially men. Men need to be able to be as self reliant as possible, whether it be critical thinking and independent thought, to just being able to take care of yourself as best you can. You look back at our forefathers, they went through the Depression. They were able to pretty much realize that this is going to happen again. And I'm going to make sure I don't put myself in a position where I'm going to get pinched too hard when I know things are going to get tough. And my grandfather was a very resilient person. Uh, People don't realize those depressions didn't kill anybody. They just made everybody a little bit stronger. It was almost like a litmus test for
Right.
every person out there to go out and see what you're made out of without having to go through like a major war or something really catastrophic. Um, and yeah, it made that generation a very, very tough generation. I think we made a mistake by getting rid of that.
My grandparents came from Cuba, from communist Cuba, and they went through something very similar. I mean, it was always a depression. Where the state give you the food, the state give you shoes, give you a certain amount of eggs per month, and depending on how many kids you had, et cetera. So they went through something very similar. So that and also, if anyone listening really wants to kind of understand what kind of man you should be to be very well rounded. One of the books that really inspired me is called The Book of the Courtier by a guy named Castiglione. He was a 14 something. He wrote this, but it was basically a letter um, showing how to court a woman, how to be a man that women would like. And he talks about things like sciences and arts, but you also have to be a good hunter. You have to be good with your words to women. You have to be a good lover. You have to be a good husband. You have to know how to use politics to get what you want, things like that. And that book that he wrote hundreds and hundreds of years ago is still completely applicable today.
Yeah,
Incredible book.
it's actually incredible to see how profound these guys would think. Without the TV and the phone, they had some time to really sit there and really think through everything they're doing. And what would be a letter to them is a book to us.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about exactly what you said, they would just sit there and think without other distractions. A lot of people tend to forget that the mind is the strongest muscle that you have, and you really do have to practice the same way. You're not going to have big biceps unless you do bicep curls. You're not going to have a strong brain unless you literally work it out. And it's very easy to get caught up in and doing low level activities, sitting and watching Netflix, taking in content, watching YouTube. You can take in as much content as you like, but when it's time to regurgitate that content that you're taking in, a lot of people, if you never practice speaking it, it's really hard to take what's in your brain and to actually say it with words. And that's something that I practice a lot because I think it's so important. If the mind is a muscle, then why not work it out? Don't let your attention be taken up by all these low level things without taking them and kind of taking all that information and plugging it into who you are and what you believe. Because when you think, you really kind of find out who you are, right? Rather than letting life and all the bad stuff that happens make you figure out who you are. There's a different way to go about it.
Yeah, and outside of critical thinking, just original thought is hard to come by in and of itself. So many books have already been written, so many thoughts have already been said, so many things have been passed down from generation to generation. Um, that just being able to one have your own independent thoughts that you actually critically think through yourself, but to believe them. Uh, Most people don't realize how shallow our belief system really is. You send a kid to college in 1 year and a couple papers, just a few papers, rewriting what you thought you believed into what they want you to believe or someone would want you to believe, and they can completely change your belief system overnight because like I said, it's a lot shallower than you really realize. We take for
Yeah.
granted a lot of our thoughts and what our opinions are as being
Well, I
more.
mean, you got to think every thought and opinion that you have was influenced by something. whether it's whether I mean, if you're talking political ideology, you might have grown up around conservative or liberal, depending on where you grew up. So you're going to be influenced by something. But it's at that point where you start thinking for yourself and you start questioning or at least challenging what you know to be true. And I think that if your argument or what you believe still holds up after you play devil's advocate and you throw other arguments against yourself, if you truly and you're honest with yourself and you're not biased even in your own mind against opening up to saying, am I really correct in the way I'm thinking? If you throw everything against yourself and the way of thought still prevails at the end, then that is a true strong belief. And that's one that you should really, really keep rather than some people have ideas that they hear on the news and they get these 30-second tidbits, sound bites, and they start regurgitating them and they say that that's what they believe. And in reality, when you question people like this, and I do this often, if you question them and ask them why they believe what they said, the answer gets really bad. And then if you ask them why they believe that what they believe is true, that's 2 layers deep. Many people, even some experts, have an incredibly hard time telling you why they believe what they believe is true, and it kind of shows the thin veiledness that a lot of people have on their ideas, whether it be, I don't know, just moral, religious, philosophical, political, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and your day to day life is dictated on so many little nuances of what you do believe that it carries on to everything in your life. But I found myself years ago. I don't watch the news anymore, but I found myself at the dinner table with extended family at a holiday arguing about other people's opinions. And I caught myself and I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to not be friends with my aunt or uncle over an opinion that's not even really mine. I was like, that's the craziest thing. Yeah. So I'll be
Oh,
honest
it
with
is.
you.
It is.
Yeah. Not having TV, not having the news on and not having it um, filtering my brain. It seems like it almost dumbs you down. It's kind of like the cell phone stopped me from memorizing phone numbers. It seems like the news almost dumbs down your not your intellectual prowess, but your ability to fine tune what hit the ground when you were running and actually meant something to you, and what is fabricated from just being in your head so much. And
There's a really important cognitive complex function that we perform whenever we do, uh, like you were saying, you forgot numbers when you got a phone. The same way how we use GPS now. There's many studies that say that the section of our brain that develops those spatial 3D maps is decreasing. It's getting smaller in size when they do fMRI brain scans. And it's because if you don't lose it, or rather, if you don't use it, you lose it. And because we just follow GPS all the time, we never actually know where we're going. People don't even know how to get around their own area anymore, which is incredibly scary. Because if anything were to happen to the phones and it stops working, you don't know where you're at, you don't know where you're going. The entire commerce and logistics would be done for. So there is something to be said about doing things yourself and not having to use technology, using it as a tool, not as something that you have to lean on.
but we're lazy. We're so lazy. If given the opportunity, I would say 7 out of 10 kids would just play video games in the basement.
That's an interesting thing that I think about a lot. Is if left to their own devices, what would humans do? And then I go into it's funny that you mentioned this because I've been thinking about this for the last like 2 weeks and just writing about this is what is the ultimate goal of humanity? Now, there's no one right answer because we have no idea, where we're going or what our final form is going to be. But I've been thinking with all this AI, I've been interviewing AI experts and people who use ChatGPT to make a bunch of money and stuff like that. And they're saying it's saving me 40 to 50%, which is great. But in my head, I said, okay, what are you doing with that 40 or 50%? Kind of going back to what we spoke about in the beginning, are you using it on low level things like Netflix? Or are you using to help your family, your community be a better person, edify yourself? What's all this extra time going to? Um, that really depends on the person, the community, the stage in life they're at. But there's certain kids who, if you instill a value of knowledge or something to them, then hopefully the belief is that they will then go out in their lives and put that on a pedestal, put that on a pedestal. But if you're a parent who is just kind of letting your kids do whatever they want, and you haven't really instilled a good value system in them, and you allow them to overindulge in things, and it's a very, very big possibility that you leave them alone and they're just going to dive into video games all day long. Because it's such and I understand video games release dopamine on the mind, and that's such a strong connection. It's the same thing with porn, and the same thing with food. It's such a strong dopamine releaser that I can see why it is people can get addicted to it.
Yeah. Easy to chase. It's easy to chase. But it seems apparent to me that we're built for a struggle and we're built for an adventure. And the two means by which we play that game is chaos and order. So our minds were designed to overcome whatever chaos is in front of us and create order. And if you get too much order, you go back to chaos again. If you get too much chaos, you go back to order. And I think the computers bring in so much order that the lazy half of our brains, the lazy half of our bodies, will lean towards giving in to we succumb so easily. I would say 7 out of 10 if left to themselves. Say for instance, the AI was to take over in the bodies that they have there, and what Boston Dynamics and what Elon's got. If you were able to put those car minds into those bodies, which looks like it will happen, once they test out their environment and they're able to do almost everything we can do and critically think for themselves after they test their ideas instead of just testing on paper, there's going to be an entire class of humans that are unnecessary.
I wouldn't say entire class. I'd say all humans. So,
well, no, not all humans. 1% will always have a value, and the whole world will pretty much cater to them, and that will never end.
That all depends if the humans are integrated with AI, because as it stands now, obviously, so AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, that's what we call a super AI or cognizant or conscious AI. When that comes, we're all done. If you ask me, I don't believe that us in our current evolutionary state, or our current state, if you believe in evolution or creationism, that we're not fit for the future. Number one, we can't travel to space. Our skin is really affected by radiation. We don't need noses if there's no air, if there's no atmosphere. So if you're talking, traveling to space, we're not going to have noses. It's unnecessary. Our eyes are only this big because we're this far away from the sun, and our eyes are this big. So if we live on another planet, let's say Jupiter or Saturn or anything else, our eyes would have to be massively larger to take in the fewer rays of the sun that are reaching it. So we have to eat food, which is just, we have to kill things and absorb it into our bodies to stay alive. Like, that's a very labor intensive action. Whereas a computer just needs heat and cold. So if we're talking generations ahead of us, yeah, I don't think we are the final form or whatever species is going to start faring along the planets. I do think there will be still humans, like the old school humans, and say, no, I'm not going to connect to the AI or anything like that. And then, but those will be far few and in between, because it'll be so hard to live in a world where you don't have these superhuman powers that everyone else does. It'd be like some from the 1400s living today. But that's my thought on it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to go in that manner exactly. I think what people see AI integrating into your body is kind of like what people were saying with our minds, being able to read each other's minds and be able to lift things with our minds and stuff. I think it's nonsense. I don't think we're going to be lifting anything with our minds 1,000 years from now, or 5,000 or 10,000 years from now. I think our minds do exactly what our minds have always done, and they always will do to a certain degree. When it is integrated, I'm pretty sure Elon will figure it out, or somebody after him will figure it out. I think we'll just be in a metaverse where we work there instead of working here. Because it looks to me like the banks are unnecessary. It looks like most like truck drivers, I think 40 or 50% of the lower middle class, between $25,000 and $55,000 a year. How many men is that? Millions of men, all useless. So banks are useless. It looks like baristas are going to be useless to a certain extent. Again, the top 5 or 10% may need people, maybe, to cater to them, because it's more of a luxury to have someone clean your clothes than to have a robot clean your clothes. But
yeah, there's been a lot of thinking about which jobs are going to be replaced the least, and what we thought maybe 5 years ago is actually not the case anymore. So We thought maybe doctors, lawyers, we're going to be in like white collar jobs. We're going to be some of the last, but in fact,
They're the first.
AI already is replacing accountants, tax preparers, lawyers. It can read through a 1,000-page legal document in a second and find errors and omissions in it. It can teach kids better than you can give it
have you seen how the Chinese are doing that with the teaching the kids with the AI? That's wild.
Yeah. You can have a customized, programmable curriculum for each individual student, depending on how fast they're picking up, the literature. There's a lot of things happening, and I mean, not even talking about, of course, truck drivers and blue collar jobs and automation and things like that, but actual white collar jobs. So literally, I think someone in JP Morgan Chase just came out this and said that in the next 5 years, 80% of jobs are going to be essentially done by computers. 80%.
80%. Yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that all day. Easily 80%. I dated a girl in Connecticut. Her father was a longshoreman. They fought the automation of removing the boxes. They lost. They lost all the automation argument. It took a couple extra years because their union was pretty strong, but nonetheless, they lost the argument because you can't unwheel the wheel. The wheel's going to be here to the end. There'll be 0.2 seconds left on Earth, and there will be a fucking wheel somewhere in there. It'll be there. It'll definitely be there. And the same thing with all the automation and everything else going on. There's no going back. There's no going back to the atom bomb. There's no putting it back in the box. So when it comes to all this stuff, 80%, I think we're literally trickling all the jobs on purpose. I think they're being kind, and they're slowly letting these jobs disappear. What is Facebook letting go of 10,000 after Twitter did it? Because it was self-evident that they didn't need all those people. I mean,
Facebook tried to grow way too fast with their metaverse, and they bit the bullet. Which, I mean, of course, is going to happen. Whenever you have a nascent technology that's unproven, you're going to spend a lot of money and waste a lot of money. But they have the money to waste. If anyone can do it, it's them. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And so, obviously, we've seen this coming for quite a while. Andrew Yang, who is a guy who ran for president in 2020, I love him. Very common sense. He ran as a Democrat, but he wasn't really a Democrat. He talked about this, 3 years ago. The fact that our truck drivers is the most common job, or rather, sorry, a waiter or waitress is the most common job among females in America. And truck drivers, we have, tens and tens of thousands of them, all going to be replaced. A good book called The Driver in the Driverless Car that came out around the same time, about 2020, talked exactly about this. Now we're about to get to this point, but what the author talks about is that when you start having truck drivers and taxi drivers and Uber drivers completely out of a job because the robot's doing it for them, it's going to cause riots. It's going to cause civil unrest because you have all these people who have been displaced and don't have any retraining. The entire retraining of people has proven to be a complete failure.
Yeah, but what are you going to retrain them to do? You can't retrain them to do anything else.
Yeah, about 1 to 3% of the people actually get retrained and get hired by a company. But the fact of the matter is, number one, who's going to hire an old person who just learned how to code compared to like a 25-year-old? And secondly, when the coders are out of jobs because ChatGPT can do the job easily, there are no jobs. So what are you going to retrain someone to do? There's nothing to do. And that's why, I'm a big proponent of something. And, Elon Musk and Andrew Yang have talked about this, is something about universal basic income. So essentially, if these robots never have to sleep, never have to eat, never take a break, aren't going to sue the company, there's no sexual harassment, they don't stop, they don't come into work and because they have a fight with their girlfriend and they're less efficient, they're always 100% efficient unless they don't break down. With all this extra revenue that the robots are going to create, why not siphon that sum to the people? Unless you get rid of the entire monetary system, but then what do you replace it with? So there's all these things that we're going to have to try to figure out in the next 5 to 10 years, but it's coming. There's no stopping. It's like a tsunami wave that's about to hit us. And people really, they're still asleep to this fact. They hear AI, they see the Boston robotic dogs and, oh, that's crazy, it's coming, but no, it's here. And once we get quantum computers, which, IBM already have, I believe it's about 138 qubit quantum computer. Once those things get commercialized, that is game over. That's it.
Yeah.
So I know this is kind of doom and gloom and dark and scary, but
no, it's actually really profound because if you think about it, okay, we got to the point, I would say at the very beginning of Donald Trump's presidency there, where we were at like an age of abundance. Gas was like $1.15, $1.20 here outside of San Antonio. Eggs were like 75 cents a carton. And you go to the store and the shirt that was $5, $10 the week before was 75% off, which means now for the same price, I could buy 4 shirts. I'm looking at TVs at Walmart right now. A little TV is a little bit bigger than this monitor here is going for $88. There's going to be a point where everybody's going to have so many TVs in their house, a TV is going to be almost worthless. It's kind of like no one kills each other over Jordans anymore because everybody's got Jordans. No one's robbing cars for their stereos anymore. We're going to get to the point with these robots where everybody can, how many screwdrivers, how many drills, how many screws, how many shoes, how many eggs can a robot make versus a human being? How many? Yeah. To the point where we don't need them anymore. We just don't need them. And if we did need them, they would be worth almost nothing. You know, you got ISO standard and a robot all around the world making the same product until we just don't need them anymore. Can you imagine every house having a toaster for free? I mean, it can literally get to that point. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to have to test ourselves. We're going to have to find out who we really are. Because if 7 out of 10 people left to their own devices get fat and play video games, the three on top that decided to stay healthy and work hard and put some effort into something. I don't know what it is. Maybe bike around the country. I don't know, but something. And they're not going to put up with you consuming all the resources for no reason.
There's a really good movie. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Idiocracy.
Yeah, it's great, man. That's
a great movie. And that movie was very before its time.
Way before its time. And Luke Wilson or Owen Wilson? Luke Wilson.
Luke Wilson. Yeah.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Incredible movie. Where it has the Costco's. I think it's Costco's that are like the size of cities. And you essentially live inside one, which is incredible. I don't know if people are aware of what's been happening, by the way, with just talking about cities owned by big companies is so Nevada, they passed a law. Of course, Nevada has a lot of unused land that nobody wants. So they passed they're doing studies right now on letting companies own cities. So city-owned companies. So the way that you subscribe to Netflix instead of Prime, or maybe some people like Peacock because it's cheaper. Imagine that ecosystem, but living in a city owned by a company where the company runs the police force, enforces the laws, charges taxes, and depending on how much money you had, you can go live in Amazon City. And if you wanted to upgrade, you can go live in Tesla City. So what they're doing is they're making, in order to get rid of this land, they're saying if you're a company and you want to start a city in Nevada, you have to have I believe it's 80 by 80 miles or something like that. It's like an 80 by 80 mile piece of land. So these companies are buying up all this land in Nevada. I've been doing a lot of research on this for the last few years, and essentially there's a big lobby that's funded by a lot of these tech companies, Silicon Valley companies, that are trying to get them to pass this law and let companies have their own city. So in the future, rather than living this rundown city that the government made, hey, I can go live in this super futuristic, Amazon city that Jeff Bezos made, where it's like a future. So then you'd have the government competing with the cities. And then I feel like we'd go back to a sort of like feudalism type in the Middle Ages, where you had the kings and then he had the lords, and the lords would essentially allow the workers to live on their land and pay their dues or their tax to the Lord. It'd be the same thing where you'd have the Lord or rather the king would be the government, and then the feudal lords would be these companies. And then you'd have the peasant or the commoners living inside the city and paying taxes all the way up.
Can you imagine going right back to where we started from? And the whole point of this country 300 years ago was to stay away from that nonsense. And we could easily be the ones that bring it back worldwide all over again.
Yeah. I do see it going that direction. Something is coming really big. I don't know what.
Yeah, I know. I wish I could figure it out, man. I would love to put some money on it in the stock right now. I saw Uber as something that's going to explode, so I put some money in Uber because once they take the people out of the cars, their profit's gonna explode.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, Uber is all they've done is just collect data this entire time. They're burning through cash, but they don't care. They have so many investors behind them because they understand that data is a ball game. You have the data and the analytics. I mean, look at Amazon. All they are is just data and analytics. That's all they are. You sell something on Amazon, you don't get their email. Guess who does? Amazon does. All your browsing habits, you don't. If I'm selling a product on Amazon, I don't know what people are doing. I have no idea. Amazon has all that data, and that's how they're able to monetize everything and essentially take over everything.
Yeah. Well, they're making a huge profit. It's an app that makes them.
Uber's been losing money. They have not.
No. I know on paper when they say we made $100 million and we spent $999 million. Trust me when I say this, the people working there are making a fortune off that app. And they're not.
Oh, the people
no
are.
They're not starving.
No.
Yeah.
But according to them, I mean, the company is losing money, but everyone else is eating really good.
Yeah, I don't think Nike really makes a ton of money either. When you look at the actual books of, there's a bunch of companies that don't make a ton of money when you look at how much
Walmart runs
in.
on. Yeah, Walmart runs on a 1% net profit, 1%, which is nothing.
And they can barely compete with Amazon. They can barely compete.
Yeah,
especially
the
in the big
scale
cities.
is just so big.
Yeah. And the scale's so big. But again, if you look at their profit margin and then actually what they consider to be the money they made in profit to their quarterly taxes there, normally there's a big discrepancy. Not that they're cheating or hiding the money, but you play games with your corporation and those C corps can do all kinds of stuff and bounce that money.
That's the American way.
Yeah, and that's fine. If you can't do it, it's legal. I'm not going to put it against you or anything. It's just, I'm telling you, when those cars go online, Uber, I'm hoping Uber skyrockets, maybe even allows for some of that profit to actually exist. So maybe the shareholders can make a fortune. I don't know.
Well, that's what Elon's goal is with the Teslas. That's why he's raising the self-driving software $1,000 every year, because what he says is once it goes online and once the self-driving is by the government can do self-driving, then essentially if you own a Tesla on your app, you tell that Tesla what hours of the day you want it to go and drive people around. So it's like you're owning a franchise. So if you're at work from 9 to 5, you tell the Tesla, hey, from 9:30 to 4:30, go drive people around and be back when I need you. So that car will be generating profit for you. So he estimates that each car, if you allow it to run full time, will make you about $100,000 a year. So that's why he says this is an investment, not a depreciating asset, which is why he's increased the price of the self-driving. Now the cars have gone down in price, but that's different. And they have, what's incredible about Tesla is that they have billions of miles actually driven in real world. In the real world, companies like Waymo, who have been funded by Amazon and Toyota, they're doing it with LiDAR and they're doing simulated miles. So there's a big difference between simulated miles and actual real world miles. The simulation can't account for every single thing that's going to happen, different shades of light, things coming out in the street. So Tesla has a leg up because they have their cars everywhere and all that data is going to the cloud, is going to them. So they have simulated miles and actual miles. Waymo has simulated miles, but they also now have, they're starting a robo-taxi is already active in Vegas using the LiDARs. Those LiDARs are incredibly expensive, about $10,000 per LiDAR, which adds the total cost of the car to be an extraordinary amount. Elon says I could do it with $12 cameras because it's software at the end of the day. So it's just that I love this stuff.
The cameras are having issues too, though.
The cameras are having issues, but it's a software behind it that really makes a difference, because the cameras are just dumb software, or rather dumb hardware.
Yeah, and old hardware. It's not, the cameras are not new. They're not brand new.
Yeah. They definitely are upgrading the cameras as well.
Yeah.
So that's
But yeah, no, the technology he has is amazing. The opportunity for a car to make you $100,000 a year is amazing. And it makes me think, if you can get a robot to have all that same cameras and that same Wi-Fi and that same GPS and the same cell phone 5G technology inside of it, those robots can probably make you way more than $100,000 a year. And you don't need them to come back to carry you home. You can just send them off to Antarctica. You can just send them off to Peru. You can send them off anywhere you want.
The interesting thing is going to be, so now we have drones fighting. This is the first drone war. This is the first war, the war between Ukraine and Russia right now that we've ever seen drones being used the way they're used. Commercial drones strapped with grenades to the top of them with a 3D printed latch, so that when they turn on the light, the latch unhinges and it drops a grenade. Um, China has said that they're going to stop selling so many commercial drones because everyone's buying them up and sending them to Ukraine or sending them to Russia. So I say that because this is the next generation, or rather, this is the next generation of war. It's going to be incredibly scary to see what happens as companies make more deadly drones, strapping machine guns onto it and having facial recognition scanners. Things like having, the U.S. has already, and China as well, they've already tested drone swarms where you have these tiny little, drones that have the same kind of facial recognition that the iPhones do. I mean, it's not crazy to have them now, and all it has to do is identify an enemy soldier. You send 1,000 drones, 1,000 people dead, just like that. So war, if you do war in the beginning, rather in the future, it's going to be extremely costly. This is something Einstein said. He says, I don't know what the next war will be fought with, what weapons the next war will be fought with, but the one after that will be fought with sticks and stones.
Wild,
So
huh?
he's a
Can you
smart
imagine?
guy.
Well, my concern would be that he not only is he right, but it kind of makes sense. Theoretically, we go down the road where the cars bring the food to your house. You don't have to leave your house. The robots fix everything, and everything's perfect. We live in a completely structured environment where we don't have any snakes in the garden. They're just there's no need to worry about that at all. Without that chaos, you don't get the adventure. Without that adventure, you get lazy. Now it's 7 out of 10 naturally. Now it's 9 out of 10 because how many people eventually just give up? I try to run every day. I try to find an adventure. I try to do this. And you know what? There's just nothing out there to do that everybody hasn't already done. And I'll be honest with you, once you get to that point, technology takes complete control. Not that it wanted to, but it had no choice. And one day, everybody's too dumb to fix it when it breaks.
Yeah, there's a lot of futurists think about this is
And it doesn't take long for that to happen. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take like 3,000 years for it to get to that point either. That can happen in 1 or 2 years, where it just
yeah.
expands so fast, and then it just implodes in itself and some
Well,
unforeseen scenario.
there is a thing about self-replicating robots, and that's what humans are aiming for, or rather, that's what people in that industry are aiming for. Because you can't send humans to build stuff in space. Just the fact that you're up there with a limited amount of oxygen and limited amount of thrust, it's so dangerous. But if you have self-replicating robots, it wouldn't take long. I think about 8 generations of robots would pretty much do anything you could ever want them to do. So if you have 8 robots and they can create 8 robots, and those now you have 16 robots, they can create, 16 more. By the time you get to 8 generations, you have, I think what the numbers are, like tens or like hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of robots. So that's a scary thing. So there's something, in robotics called the paperclip problem. And it's like a paradox, but essentially the way it goes is if you program a robot to make the best paper clips, to all it does is to make paper clips. That's the only rule you give it. Eventually that robot will suck every resource on earth just to make paper clips because it doesn't understand anything else. That's the only rule you give it. So there's a lot of things that we're coming up to, and there's some human rights councils that are trying to figure out what kind of rules to give robots and what to program it in. But you're going to have people all the time. I mean, you're going to have people who hack into it or who just modify them to do what it's going to be
Well,
incredible.
I think that the best way to solve that particular problem would be the same way America solved the tyranny problem with the right to bear arms. If everybody's allowed to own a robot and everybody's allowed to own a car within reason, you just keep the price to a certain level because you make it enough times that it's just like the TV. It gets to $88. It weighs 3 pounds and it's $88. It takes someone at McDonald's 5 hours to buy a TV that weighs 3 pounds, which when I was a kid, they were 150 pounds and it took a whole week, if not 2 weeks pay
Yeah.
for a TV. So um, make those robots accessible to as many people as possible. And that would at least allow the rich to not be able to completely dominate us like lords. Yeah, I love the technology. I love the idea of just thinking through the what ifs because we're in a time, it's got to be I couldn't imagine what it was like in the Renaissance time when everybody was coming up with these independent thoughts, these new ideas. Everybody was learning how to read a little bit more. There was a little less war, so everybody had time to just put more effort into things that were deemed unnecessary before that time. And there was an explosion in all those cities in Europe and even in the Middle East. And I think we're at that point right now, times 10. And I don't even think we realize the freedoms we have and how exciting it is. I don't know if the appreciation is lacking in so many people.
You know what it is a lot is it's humans always resist change. If you feel like things are going well, then you're going to resist change, because if you think things are okay, the only other option is that whatever changes can make things not okay. And I mean, that's so there's a law of entropy basically that says that things will go from a normal state, or rather from a simple state, to a very chaotic state. It's just the nature of the world. So we have ionizing radiation and things like that. Everything's going from simple to complicated. And if you think back to, let's just say, even the 80s or 1970s, things look so much simpler than they are now. And then from there, you can go back to the 1800s and then the 1400s. I mean, and it gets simpler and simpler. So it's an exciting time, but if you're resisting change, it can be the worst time for you. So it really all depends on your mindset.
Well, I think Elon Musk actually addressed that one time in a conversation when he said, we're lucky we only last 60 to 80 years because bad ideas and all that stuff die with us every 80 years. So the insistence on using a bank is going to die in about 40 years because all those people that are insistent on it won't be here anymore. And the death of all these other unnecessary things, because if you think about it right now, how many people would resist the grocery store just not existing? Probably a third of the population. The elderly, they're going to the grocery store whether you like it or not.
Oh, yeah.
But if every 80 years we die, all those people that are stubborn, their stubbornness dies with them, and we're able to keep on progressing without any issue.
That's something about that, which I think about a lot. And I've listened to a lot of futurists talk about this. It's kind of scary. But you're right. Nature has a way of washing out everyone with death, right? That's really the Great Reset. So you have leaders like, Hitler, Putin, whatever, these guys, death always comes to them, and then things always change. But now, because of genetics, or rather, because we're studying the human genome, we're only about 5 to 10 years away from extending lifetimes with the pill. I mean, it's here. So once you can live to, let's just say, 150, 200, those despots in those countries, those authoritarian leaders aren't going to die.
Yeah, those bad ideas. Those bad ideas last 300 years. Can you imagine?
300 years.
Can you imagine if Pol Pot was only like a third of the way in?
Imagine that. That's going to change everything. Not only that, but if you're a young person, you know that when you're 18 or to like, let's say 24, you're still kind of on the bottom of the ladder, and you wait for the older people to retire, and then you take their places. But if that never happens, then the mentality of someone saying, I need to wait 50 years to get an opportunity, that's going to change the way you think. It's going to make people depressed. If people, if no one ever dies.
You're assuming the poor are allowed to live 300 years.
That's all going to come down to money.
Yeah, because I'm going to be honest with you. If I got a pill that makes you last 400 years, are you absolutely positively sure you're going to share it with me and my kids?
That all depends. If you got to think from,
do you want 7 billion people to live forever?
So that all depends from the perspective of the company. If the company is there to make money, yes, the more people alive, staying up longer is going to buy more of their pills. So if you're thinking about purely capitalistic, yes. If it's a bearing on society where no one ever dies and we can't sustain the population, well, then they're going to have outside forces saying.
I'm going to argue that point because I'm a big advocate. I don't like those conspiracy theories where there was a 200-mile carburetor and they just suppressed it because they didn't want the carburetor to put the oil companies out of business or whatever it was. It's nonsense because the first car that came up with the 300 miles a gallon car was the #1 car in the country the next day. Do you know what I'm saying? If Ford came up with a car that could do 300 miles a gallon, they were the #1 company on earth. So I don't believe that. But you were saying, say that again. What was that last part there?
Oh, I was thinking. No, I was saying, what's the benefit for a
Oh,
company
okay. Well, here, well, okay.
allowing? Yeah,
We had a chance for Chevy to send all the old technology for the cars from the 70s and 80s to China, and China was going to make a four-cylinder car where you roll down the window by hand, and there was nothing special to it. They were going to make it for a profit at $5,000.
China.
Yes, it was
Okay.
like right before Donald Trump got into office. Chevy was going to go in there. I think it was going to be called Cherry or something like that. But the point was they were going to use all the old technology because that motor is still good. That engineered motor that someone designed 70 years ago that was used in 1980 was
Hmm.
still very valid. It had it didn't have the carburetor. It had the fuel injection. But they weren't going to do anything fancy. They were just going to use old technology and all the old equipment that no one uses anymore, and they were just going to do manual labor as much as they could, and they were going to pump out these cars, little four-cylinder, $5,000. But they said, "Oh, we don't want abundance. We don't want them to get to the point where the TV's $88. What happens if TVs are $9 and you can get a used car for $500, and everybody's making $30 an hour? Now, no one's going to buy cars for 100 years. There's going to be so many $200 cars out there that run perfectly fine. So literally, I think if you look at communism, the first thing they do to make everybody equal is they get rid of the abundance. They make everything scarce. That's rule number one in communism. 101: make everything as scarce as possible for everybody but the 1%. And it looks like that's kind of the mindset of a lot of the people that are on the top of the food chain right now, is to make everything scarce. If you make a car run on batteries, do you think we're going to make 300 million cars with batteries in the next 500 years?
That's actually a really good question. I made a video
So
about this.
the
Went
whole
on a deep
point would
dive.
be the
Oh,
whole point
okay.
would be to make that car nearly impossible for the average man to get on purpose. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
I
And
got you.
make food expensive on purpose. Now, you can't live on the food, but let's get everybody on the verge of almost eating grasshoppers. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And all of a
There's
sudden,
a
we had a point where we were going to buy T-shirts for a nickel and TVs for $88 and cars for $5,000, and all of a sudden everything's scarce. You think that's by accident?
So there's that's a complicated question. You can go the route of money. Why is everything getting more expensive? And also complexity. With all the new technologies and the chips, everything is so much harder to make, which is one of the
Oh
reasons
no,
why.
hold on. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not trying to cut you off on that. But here's
Mhm.
the deal: when I was a kid, you'd buy a VHS tape. It was made out of this giant piece of plastic. It had a plastic reel inside of it, and that plastic was inside a box that was wrapped in clear plastic. And they put these really fancy pictures on the box. And then they had 40 or 50 of them in a cardboard box. And they took 600 of those boxes full of plastic with plastic tape inside of it, and they shipped them all over the country. And I paid $18 for a movie or $20 for a movie, or I rented it for $4 at Blockbuster. Now I can get a movie on YouTube in 2.5 seconds, and I don't have any plastic, any cardboard, any boxes, any shipping, any moving. There was no factory involved. How is that movie still the same exact price?
The profits just went up for the company,
Well,
but the movie stayed the same price.
yeah. So yeah, if you think about it, just the printing on that cardboard box must have cost millions, let
Yeah.
alone the production of the tape, the recording on the tape getting put into the plastic box, and then how many men touched that? How many factories had to be involved? How many
Yep.
trucks shipped that tape was worth like 8 cents
Hmm.
of a
But
movie.
it was all the logistics, the labor,
Yeah.
the
So
taxes.
I'm telling you now, they're making things scarce on purpose, and we were at an age of abundance, and we're literally it's almost like a de-evolution of economic growth. I don't know how else to call it. I'm trying to think of a word that would describe the shrinking of that. Like I said, you got people in third world countries running around in Adidas. And they got brand new clothes. And they probably
Yeah.
could throw them away and get brand new clothes tomorrow. There's probably a building with hundreds of billions of shirts and Adidas sweatpants everywhere. They're just, uh,
Yeah. I mean, technology, the entire point of technology is to make things more abundant and easily accessible and easier to make. Absolutely. And items like shoes and clothes and food, absolutely. Yeah, they shouldn't be as expensive now. That's because we printed 30% of all the dollars ever in existence in a 16-month period during COVID. We printed $13 trillion during COVID. So that's one of the biggest issues with this whole inflation thing, which you could spend hours going down. But as far as hardware and things like that, and like cars and things, there are a lot of really hard to make pieces. Namely, that it's mostly the chips, and countries like Taiwan Semiconductor which is the biggest manufacturer of high end chips, which is why we had that chip shortage, and that's why used cars went through the roof. I mean, the prices were, astronomical because there was no one making new cars. Appliances went through the roof because nobody's making new appliances. Russia right now, they're buying because of the embargo, they're buying washing machines from all over the world and taking the chips out to use inside of their their optics lens for their tanks and things like that. It's incredible. Chips run the world. This is why one thing that Biden did well is that big infrastructure plan. Because he's like, man, if China attacks Taiwan, there go all of our chips. Taiwan makes the majority of chips in the world, and America literally makes nothing because because they make them so well. So IBM is starting a massive, I believe, $4 billion factory somewhere in Texas. Another company is doing it. So things are coming back to be made in America, which is the way they always should have been. Obviously, we sold ourselves out to China in the 90s and the 2000s and even in the 80s and stuff because it made things cheaper and easier. But now we see the ramifications of giving a one country that is a communist country the ability to make everything that we need. Things are starting to find equilibrium in some sense. In another sense, when you're talking about like this entire postmodern woke ideology, still hasn't found an equilibrium. It's still tugging on the edges. And as an analogy, the way I always look at humanity is it's like this amorphous blob that's just traveling through time. If time is a cone, and we're trying to go to the straight line, and you have people on the left and the right, each pulling humanity one way or the other. But we need each other to find equilibrium. Not to get into politics, but if you think about conservative people, they're very organized. There are people like board members, and they run the companies and accountants and things like that. And people on the left, and obviously I'm not talking with a broad stroke, like a broad brush, but just typically people on the left are very creative and come up with stuff like, let's say, the Silicon Valley people, the hippies. Steve Jobs was a massive hippie. Elon Musk loves drugs. So, you need people like that to create things. And then you also need people on the right to organize them and make them into a system that could be sustaining and profitable. So
And
when people say,
being able to balance back and forth is actually the key to success.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, I say all that to say that I see people with different ideologies, political ideologies, pulling too hard on the strings, and for a while people didn't really understand what was happening, so it kind of veered off to the left a little bit, and now you have this counter movement, this pullback, which is expected. But it's just everything's happening so fast. Our little evolutionary brain, or rather, our little brains that haven't evolved to deal with all this so quickly.
Oh yeah, no, we don't even know all the ramifications of what we're dealing with now. You look at Twitter, there's X amount of characters you're allowed to use, and then you look at other platforms like Facebook, and when you get into an argument, you got to like condense your argument down to those 200 characters. But if you go onto Facebook, there could be like this mini story on each argument, and it's kind of funny. I don't know if we're ready to even fully dissect all of that. It changes things so fast. It changes everything and no one is taking the time to pay attention because they know the next thing's coming out. We don't know what the next TikTok is, but as soon as Twitter changed the game with that small amount of words where you had to just either let it go or you had to say it in a couple sentences, and then all of a sudden TikTok's got you and everybody's doing reels, and I don't know what the next one is, but the next one's going to be even faster and something else is going to be even more profound, and no one's even going to care what the ramifications of Twitter are because we're already light years beyond. I don't know. I don't know. It's pretty amazing to see how the kids interact because
or don't interact.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. So My daughter will act kind of weird when she has to interact face to face with a stranger. But in 5 minutes, she'll feel comfortable looking through their Instagram and then going through and chatting with them on Snapchat for 5 minutes and like text message. And I'm like, wow, you are way more open to this person. It's a friend at school or a friend of a friend from school or whatever. It's not anything I'm concerned about, but it's just the way your brain was able to go to A, B, and C and how your intimacy changed so easily without ever even looking that person in the eye. And then
Yeah.
you go and help your big sister out at the restaurant, and you're struggling to talk to this 55-year-old man. I'm like, how the hell are you at the same time socially adapted and well versed at being able to carry on a conversation with somebody, and then 5 minutes later, almost completely incapable of any socialization whatsoever? I'm like, you're a well-rounded
Incredible.
person. You get great grades. I'm like, you got a lot of friends. I just don't understand. But again, I grew up. We didn't even have caller ID on the phones. You just picked up the phone and said hello, and you assumed at what time who it may be because 10
Hmm.
people, 20 people called you a day, and most of them called at certain times.
Yep.
So you would guess, but you didn't
I
know.
remember I waited 2 weeks every single day after school. I'd come and wait for the caller ID to come in the mail when you first got it. When it came, I did not leave the side. I was waiting for people to call me because I just wanted to see the number pop up
It was
on the
just a number.
screen.
It wasn't even a name at first. And I think you had to pay like an extra $1.99 or $2.99 a month to even have it work with your phone.
That
Because
was
it
an
was just a little
incredible
piece that
time.
you added to the phone. It wasn't even part of the phone yet.
Yep.
And yeah, my friend's mom was the first one to get it.
That's incredible. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember it was the coolest thing. I remember just staring at it like, wow, this is crazy. And yeah, and that was my life for a month, just waiting around for people to call the phone.
now, I can still call that house to this day. I know that phone number. 35 years later, I still know that phone number.
Wow.
I could see it on that keypad.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think, your listeners they would have gotten into this conversation having no idea what's going to happen, and then just mind blown by all the different directions that we took it. But it's good to have things like that, to
I
have
think so.
conversations like that.
Fabian, I want to know how'd you get started? What was the passion you were chasing that got you into what you're doing now?
Simple knowledge, um, unbiased knowledge, objective knowledge, truth, and that's what I spread. I spread the truth that I've and like the knowledge that I've researched, in an unbiased, independent way. And what better to leave this world than critical thinking and good knowledge? So that's my motivation.
Well, you're in a class of people that have been doing this for thousands of years, and no one ever seems to be settled with the answer. It's one of those endless journeys.
It is
You know,
absolutely.
and
Yep.
I've been trying to go on a journey where whatever I do, I try my very best to tell the truth or at least not lie on purpose, which is far more difficult than you think. Because as you get sensitive to it and as you try to go harder and you try to do more, you end up finding yourself wanting to hold other people accountable too. It happened to me a couple of weeks ago at the grocery store. I gave the guy the coupon. The guy couldn't get the coupon to work. He was lazy and he just put a save $1 and he just moved
Mm,
on. And I'm like, I bit my teeth, but I wish I would have said, go do your job correctly. Go get someone to fix it.
hmm.
I know you're annoyed by your job right now, but the extra 75 seconds, and I was sensitive enough to still want to talk about it. That I didn't hold him
Yeah.
accountable, to be honest, and he just, I guess, in a form, tried to lie and just pass it off for $1. It should have been $2, and I don't care about the money. The dollar was
Yeah.
irrelevant. I'm sensitive enough where I want to hold other people accountable. It sounds crazy, but that journey is an amazing journey because then you don't know where it goes. When you lie, you know where it goes. You're going to fail. You're going to try to hold this baby for as long as you can, and eventually you're going to get caught, and reality is going to unbend, and it's going to snap, and it's going to hit you in the face, and you're eventually. And why we try to hold on to it to the bitter end as everything's crumbling, we're still trying to prop up that lie, and I don't know,
Yep.
but looking for truth, trying to tell the truth. Those are amazing journeys in and of themselves. And that's kind of
Absolutely.
cool that that's one of your passions, man. Uh, that's another thing that I've learned just on this journey is you don't chase your passions, or you don't find your passions. Your passions find you, and then you end up chasing them. And there's no knowing where that goes either. There's no
Yeah.
there's no set standard by which you could say I've reached knowing the truth. I've reached my goal of completing that task. You just don't know where it goes and how far it can go. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing.
No, and you have to. The people have a yearn for for long for a conversation. So, the fact that you're doing it and you're doing it well, it's just a testament to all your listeners listening to you. For a good reason. You clearly have life experience and you have a good head on your shoulders and and you talk logically. So that's a plus. I mean, if you can find those three things in someone, keep listening to them because you listen to a lot of the mainstream media and these people on the news, like they're like, oh, I can't stand that guy. I can't stand what he says. The guy's not saying what he wants to say. There's a producer and there's a writer that just write in a teleprompter and they just read whatever's on there. So you're not even getting news from the person you think you're getting news from. So someone like you doing this and just talking, unhinged and raw and unfiltered, that's truth, not the stuff you see on the news. So, I definitely commend you because I know how hard it is to do it and to stay true to yourself. So, thank you for doing this stuff. And, if you're listening to him and you're one of his listeners, keep listening.
And it's a lot of fun, man. And I know most of the guys they put it on and then they're playing on their phones anyways, or they're doing something else, they're cooking dinner or whatever. So a lot of the long form stuff is almost like background noise because I'm literally competing with what used to be the TV in the living room. And it's
Yep.
crazy, right? So you would have 5 people in the living room and everybody would argue, are we going to watch the news or are we going to watch The Price is Right or are we going to watch cartoons? And everybody would come to a consensus. And so you had Seinfeld and you had all these other shows that were kind of for everybody, where everybody could
Mm-hmm.
drone out in front of. But now I'm not vying for 5 people to watch one thing. I'm vying for one little niche person out of those 5 people to listen to me for 2 hours or an hour or
Yeah.
whatever it be. And normally, like I said, it's in the background. It's like the TV. It's just in the background.
Yeah.
So Fabian,
Absolutely.
saw some of your content where you said you rode your bike across the country. Are we talking California to New York?
California to New York, LA to New York. Yeah.
Nice.
During COVID, they closed the gyms and, I tried to ride it across the country one time in 2009. Made it to New Mexico, gave up. I did it completely wrong. Wrong kind of bike, wrong kind of tires, wrong kind of everything. And I had the opportunity to do it again. And, I put it out on social media, said I'm going to do it. That way I wouldn't not do it. And I did it. So it was the dumbest and the smartest thing I ever did. So
Yeah, you had time to kill, man. COVID really ate away at just being able. I wish I would have done this 2 years ago. I wish I would have thought about this when I had the chance because, yeah, COVID really opened up all kinds of opportunities. I talked to a girl like 3 months ago who said she flew all over like Asia and stuff. Once you got out of the country, that you could do almost anything you wanted. There was no one anywhere. All the tourist traps were empty, and they were
mhm.
begging you to do everything. And they were copying all kinds of stuff and they would upgrade all kinds of stuff. You'd be in an airplane with like 30 people. Yeah. And
Yep,
she said she
that's
went all
that's
over
very
the
true.
place. Yeah, she had a wild time doing twice as much as she could have at half
Hmm.
the cost. Everything was like half the cost.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I got about 5 more minutes. And I got to go to a dinner.
oh man.
Yeah,
Oh Fabian, shoot, man. We didn't get into any of the 3 questions.
I
I mean,
know,
I tried to get into them, but yeah, that was
but
a great
we had
conversation, man.
we had good conversations. That's what matters.
Absolutely. All right. Well, on that note, then, if you got 5 minutes, let's I'll let you plug away all your stuff. Let everybody know how they can reach you if they want to meet you.
Yeah, sure. So I have a podcast called The Daily Elevated. It's just kind of the stuff I'm talking about, unbiased, independent, critical thinking. I typically talk crap on both sides of the political aisle, so you might be offended, but it's okay because I offend the other people too. I call it right down the line. I'm like a good umpire. You can find me, just type in Daily Elevated on Google or Fabian Lux on Google, and it'll pop right up. It's on all the podcast networks. But Other than that, I I'm part of the founding team of something called Bank X, which I think you'd like because you said that you said that you give banks another 40 years of being relevant. So essentially, banks were created to take your money. You give them their money, and then they charge you to keep the money there, and then they make all the interest off it, which makes absolutely no sense in a modern world. So, one of the smartest persons I've ever met, Lance Parker, for the last 2 years, he's been creating something which is going to replace the banks essentially on the blockchain, where the individual person creates a currency. The individual person earns the interest instead of the bank earning the interest. There is no middleman. It's completely decentralized. There are no fees in the system. You can and you essentially create currency, and the currency is not it's not tied to the U.S. dollar, which is what a lot of stable coins are. It's tied to silver, because silver is, obviously you can't make more of it. There's a finite amount of it, and silver, there's about 9 times the amount of silver than there is of gold, and silver is used much more in products, right? Whereas gold is typically just sitting in a vault. It's an incredible piece of machinery that he's created. We actually launch this coming week. So it's been in process for 2 years. We've had tons of PhDs working on it, mathematics professors from different universities. It's having audits and economic audits. It's been a hell of a ride. But essentially, he did it because he's very against banks, and you don't really need them anymore. The
Oh yeah,
banks have just never
they're irrelevant. They really are.
Yeah.
With your phone and everything, my bank isn't even in town anymore.
Yep. Exactly. But they're still taking your interest and they're still taking your money. And the thing is, because of fractional reserve banking, your money's not even in the bank. As soon as it goes, they only keep 2% of it, and the rest is going and working for it. And now they have something called bail-in laws, which you didn't even get into. Obama passed this thing called the bail-in laws, where essentially, because the banks all failed, now essentially what happens is, if a bank goes insolvent, they can use the depositor's money to pay itself back before they go get government help. So your money can be taken if a bank makes bad decisions. It's called the bail-in laws. It's something you should definitely look into. Very scary. So anyway, that's typically what I do in my day.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I saw that, and I was going to touch on that. I was going to touch on a lot of things. The woke credit score, the debt limit, Elon Musk's rocket.
There's so much. Yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah, I didn't get to any of it.
I mean, there's always next time. So
there you go.